trying to avoid talking about Ava, even though you came for Dr. Disrespect's throat when the allegations against him came out. Though also, there you had many, including Moist himself, saying, he actually did chime in on the Ava situation pretty early. Though this also, as he's hardly the only one getting attacked over this. In fact, we're seeing situations like this and pushback all over the place. Or you have big creators like Ludwig responding to calls to respond by saying, my video on Doc literally came out 2 days after Charlie's, not immediately after information came out, saying I waited for Doc's statement on Twitter and on Steam and his removal from Midnight Society, and adding, I'm literally in Paris with my family while y'all motherfuckers so horny for a statement. Also, we're seeing a number of those who did speak out still being hit, with a number of people still going after Pokimane and Valkyrie, who we talked about yesterday. We're seeing many shifting their criticism from you aren't talking about this to you didn't go in against Ava enough, or with people going back to when Pokey said yuck and Ray said Dr. Disgusting after the whole Dr. Disrespect situation. Though there you saw a good number of people defending them, noting that their responses came a few days after the Dr. Disrespect allegations had already been stewing and adding. The way people are treating Valkyrie and Pokimane over this Ava situation makes me so sad. This happened in one day. I still don't fully know what the fuck is going on. And going on to say, creators didn't speak up against Dr. Disrespect until he made a statement himself. Ray and Pokey made statements condemning the behavior. What more do you want? And we also saw Ray defending herself, saying she felt pressure to put out a tweet as soon as possible, saying her mentions were being swarmed, that large creators were calling people out, saying she had to take a break from moving in order to look into the situation, and adding, I equally called both Dr. D and Ava disgusting after their statements. But with all that said, it's gonna be very interesting to see what happens from here. And I say that not only because some have alleged that there's gonna be more that comes out, but also because the mainstream media has now latched onto this story. With the BBC, Sky News, and Forbes, just to name a few, covering this today. With also part of this seeming to be morphing into going after Mr. Beast, with people posting old clips of him that are racking up views, doing things like dropping a homophobic slur. There's also a clip where it appears that he asked someone if they'd put their dick inside Bad Baby, with people saying that she would have been 14 at the time. But again, all of this has been developing and evolving, and for now, we're gonna have to wait to see what comes from all this. And in the meantime, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts. And then, we've got to talk about this emotional roller coaster of a story around Christopher Dunn. And while it's in the news today, to fully understand this, we got to go back to a spring night in 1990. Because that is when you had this group of teenage boys hanging out in front of one of their homes in Missouri when a gunman suddenly opened fire on them. And this shooting killing 15-year-old Rico Rogers. And then, as the search for the shooter unfolded, you had two witnesses, aged 12 and 14, identifying Christopher Dunn, then 18 years old, as the shooter. Now, in his defense, Dunn's childhood friend testified that she was on the phone with him that night, a phone which was at his family's house. His mom also backed that up, confirming that he was at home watching TV with the family when the shooting happened.
I know he wasn't because we all was at the house. Yeah. And I told the police that. And he said, well, family people lie for family people.
But despite that, one, Dunn was tried for murder, and two, the prosecution presented no motive, no weapon, not even any physical evidence. Just the testimony of those two boys, which formed the backbone of the case against him. And this entire trial, it was over in a single afternoon, with the jury deliberating for just 45 minutes. But instead of giving Dunn the slam dunk acquittal that he expected, they found him guilty of first-degree murder, for which he was sentenced to life without parole, and he recalled this to CBS.
It was like my world just fell in front of me. I didn't see anything else but darkness.
And throughout all of this, Dunn maintained his innocence, which also led 8 years later to the story catching the eye of writer and editor Kira Kaywood.
Their testimonies didn't match, but by the time they got to court, everything matched. And so it was clear to me reading it that these young men seemed to have been coached.
And so with the help of a private investigator, she tracked down the two witnesses and both recanted their testimonies. With the first admitting that he lied because the prosecution offered him leniency on charges he was facing himself. And the second admitting that he lied because he thought Dunn was affiliated with a rival gang.
Did we see Dunn do it? No.
Okay.
No, nobody seen Dunn do it.
But Kira, she wasn't just convinced of Dunn's innocence, she also became convinced that she loved him.
We got married right here in this visiting room.
So her name is no longer Kira Kaywood, but Kira Dunn, wife of the man that she's fighting to set free. Which then brings us to 2018, when Dunn's legal team filed to vacate his conviction. And given the bombshell evidence that they now have, Dunn's family told ABC they assumed that this case would just be open and shut.
One of the guys came out and he told Mom that he believed Kris was innocent.
He said, Mrs. Dunn, on behalf of the state of Missouri, I am so sorry for what's happened to your son. I had his clothes and we had the car and we were just ready to go have something to eat afterwards.
But after 2 long years of deliberation, the judge shocked everybody by ruling that Kris Dunn had to stay in prison. Write it. This court does not believe that any jury would now convict Christopher Dunn under these facts. But then adding that even despite that, a quirk of Missouri law prohibits his release because only death row inmates can make innocence claims. And of course, Dunn, he was only given a life sentence, so this was an absolutely devastating gut punch for all, but especially his mom.
It's just hard. I'm tired.
But then even with that, Dunn still had one last hope: St. Louis Circuit Attorney Gabriel Gore. Because thanks to a 2021 state law, prosecutors can actually request a hearing if they have evidence that someone was wrongfully convicted. And so Gore filed a motion to vacate the conviction in February of this year, presenting his case to a judge in May, and he just got the decision this week, with the judge stating in no uncertain terms, the state of Missouri shall immediately discharge Christopher Dunn from its custody. Meaning that at the age of 52, having spent 33 years of his life in prison, suffered 3 heart attacks after being stabbed by another inmate, Kris Dunn can finally walk free. With Kira telling the news.
I'm still processing this. I'm so thankful, though. I can tell you that I'm so thankful that we're all still.
Except, it turns out his freedom may not be so easy. And that's because Republican Attorney General Andrew Bailey, who has maintained that Dunn is in fact guilty since the beginning, appealed the judge's ruling. And this, even though the district attorney says that under Missouri law, the AG has no right to appeal. But despite that, the Missouri Department of Corrections is refusing to let Dunn go, citing the pending appeal. As for why Bailey's doing this, I honestly cannot find an answer right now, other than maybe he has a kink for keeping innocent people locked up. Right? I mean, he has stubbornly opposed other high-profile innocence claims in Missouri recently, like with Lamar Johnson, for example, who spent 27 years in prison before being freed, and Marcellus Williams, who's set to be executed later this year. Now, there was also Sandra Hemme, who spent 43 years in prison before a judge vacated her conviction last month. In that case, Bailey's appeals kept her from being released, and he even called the prison warden to urge him not to let her go. Though there, after the judge threatened Bailey with contempt of court, she was finally set free on Friday. Right? And so now you have Dunn's family just hoping to God that he gets the same outcome.
We are overjoyed, and at the same time, we're also afraid to really exhale until Kris actually takes his first free steps and feels the free ground against his feet. When that happens, I think all these feelings we've been holding on to for so long will finally erupt.
But then, just to take a minute, y'all, the recent news cycles have just been wild. And I know that, for many, it's hard to know when you're getting the full picture, which is, what we strive for when creating the PDS each day. But that's also where today's sponsor, Ground News, comes in. See, Ground News' app and website combine news from across the political spectrum and around the world, allowing us to compare coverage with helpful context on each source, right? Like potential political bias, reporting reliability, and even the source of their funding. And often comparing coverage is critical to getting the heart of a story. Like take, for instance, Republicans calling for Biden to resign after ending his re-election campaign. With more than 100 articles published, the right is covering it slightly more, but it's clearly a hot issue for both sides of the aisle. You've got sources on the right, like the Business Standard and the New York Post, emphasizing Biden isn't fit to serve, while left-leaning sources like MSNBC call this, quote, tough to take seriously, with The Atlantic then reframing Trump as the Republicans' elderly candidate. And Ground News enables this for every story you read. It's a place for moderates, liberals, conservatives, the politically homeless, or anyone tired of mainstream narratives and interested in leaving their silos to see the full picture. And at a time where it feels like we just all live in different realities, it can help to see where potentially other people are coming from, right? How and what they're being fed. It can help you understand where they think they're coming from. And if any or all of that sounds interesting, go to ground.news/DeFranco or scan the QR code for 40% off unlimited access, which is what I use to read the news. And then, so this Benjamin Netanyahu situation has just stirred up a major shitstorm in American politics. Right? For the first time in nearly a decade, the Israeli leader addressed Congress today, and tensions have been insanely high both inside and outside the Capitol. I mean, yesterday you had hundreds of pro-Palestine protesters arrested inside a congressional building, and today you had thousands of demonstrators descending on the Capitol ahead of Netanyahu's speech. Meanwhile, in Congress, Netanyahu's visit has highlighted the sharp divides among members on Israel and his leadership during this war, particularly among Democrats. In fact, we saw dozens of members announcing beforehand that they'd be skipping the address in protest, with, according to Politico, at least 18 House Democrats and 9 Senate Democrats saying publicly they'll miss the speech. With that, including key members of leadership in both chambers, prominent Jewish leaders, and high-profile lawmakers like AOC, who said in a tweet, "It is a dark day in U.S. history when an authoritarian with a warrant request from the International Criminal Court is allowed to address a joint session of Congress. 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Hostages aren't home. Netanyahu is a war criminal. I will be boycotting his address." This was also echoed by Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American in Congress, who said in a statement, "It is utterly disgraceful that leaders from both parties have invited him to address Congress." Beyond that, we've seen others blasting the event as a political stunt, and this even including some Democrats who are attending the address, with some arguing the Republican leaders knew that it would put a strain on Democrats when they invited Netanyahu. Right, and this is foreign leaders usually address Congress in coordination with invitations from the president, but here it was actually Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson who led the effort, not Biden. A move that, emphasized the GOP support for Netanyahu in Israel while driving a wedge between Democrats just months before a chaotic election. And this at a time when Democrats are trying to unite around Kamala Harris. Also, notably here, Harris skipped the address, even though it's customary for the vice president to preside over these events. Though there, her aide said that it was because of a previously scheduled conflict and not a reflection of her views on Israel. In general, Harris has made sure not to stray from Biden's staunchly pro-Israel views, and she's actually set to meet with Netanyahu while he's in the States. But despite that, we saw Johnson see